Well, the first episode was certainly a success, and now us race fans are back doing what we do best, complaining again. Hello everybody, my name is Jack MacKenzie, and this is The Problem with X, and I am back with one of my co-hosts from the first episode. Please give it up for Darky. Hello, Darky.
Howdy.
And, this week we don't have Matt because, he's been hacked. I'm going to say hacked, through what means you may be able to guess, but we'll let him explain that next time he's on. Before we get into the series today, I think, we need to introduce, because of the series we're talking about today, we actually have an American along with us today. Please give it up for Joshua Franks.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for having me, Jack.
And, what is you were running your old podcast, but what's it called now? I'll leave a link to it below.
It's still being rebranded, but it's now called the Auto Thoughts Podcast. It's a group of me and my friends that, just talk about random stuff in the world of gaming and stuff like that. It's the old rebranded Experts of Racing podcast, so we're working on getting that started up.
Yes, and you did hear that title correctly. I just have a little bit more housekeeping to do. So the episodes of this series will now be featured over on Racing Life. They've been kind enough to feature our episodes of this show on their website. It's a really cool website. They've got news and all that sort of stuff, and it's really cool. So if you want to support us, you should go and support them. It's a really, really cool thing. I do recommend going and checking them out. Anyway, on today's episode, it's The Problem with...
Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's talk about NASCAR racing.
And Darky was very, very eager to do that intro. Now, unlike the first episode of the series, when we were talking about this before, we all have like a messenger group, and when we were talking about it in the messenger group, we all sort of came up with roughly the same ideas. And so on my little document here, I've sort of split up the different problems into sort of different categories. The first one is rules, playoffs, stage racing, and aero packages. So really all the sort of things relating to the actual racing and on-track product and the product itself. The second one is too many races and the races are too long. And 3 is simply titled Give the Fans What They Want. So if you guys are ready, I think we should get into our first problem.
Yep.
All right, so I think, Darky, you sort of came up with the general idea for this sort of first problem. Would you mind sort of explaining what you mean by that?
Well, I think when we discuss a lot of things in this series, a lot of issues will come around down to the car. But I will give NASCAR one credit. They are willing to take the risk to try things. I'll give them that thing. Like, how many series do you actually see? No, we are actually going to throw something out and try something randomly, completely different. So, I will give NASCAR that ability to say, hey, we're going to try something. If it works, it works. That's another scenario. So, but yeah, no, I think a lot of rules, and like first thing, stage racing. That's not racing. This thing where you have to race to a stage and then you have a caution and you race to another stage, that's not racing. Like, you should start the race. If there's a yellow, but it should start here and finish at the end, not all these segments. I reckon it just destroys the racing. So that's one of my big problems with it.
I'd be there sorry about that, Jack. I just want to go ahead and say I'd be there to disagree about the stage racing thing. As a guy that's grown up around this sport, seeing how the viewership has grown ever since the beginning of stage racing. Now, a lot of fans have talked down about it, yes, but I do think it brings more exciting racing because it eliminates the general, the general stereotype that the most exciting parts of the NASCAR race is the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of the race. That kind of adds more to where you have these guys battling for stage points. Like, if you were to watch Talladega, these guys were going 4 wide coming to the end of stage 1, coming to the end of stage 2, and it was like the end of the race. So I think the stage racing adds a bit more excitement for the fans who are willing to watch it all the way through.
Well, I think the stage points, if you think about it, they're a little bit pointless in the context of the championship, because you can get as many stage points as you want, but you'll most likely be beaten to the playoffs by somebody who just goes and wins one race.
Well, that can kind of be debated. Like if this past week at Texas, when Kevin Harvick slammed the outside wall, he dropped all the way to, I'd say, fourth in the standings, to where he was barely above the cut line. And the one thing that saved him was the amount of stage points that he had won this upcoming season, or not upcoming, but this past season. The stage points is kind of what saves him. And the one thing about stage points is that it helps drivers that in the previous system before stage points, it was kind of hard to, a driver could be so good, lead every lap but the last one, and get wrecked on the last lap and finish in last place and, lose all those points. In the stage point system, it improves, I wouldn't say improves, but it gifts towards consistent racing and consistent drivers who are constantly up there in the top 10 at the end of these stages, who get a little bit of bonus for being so consistent during the race.
Yeah, I can see the benefit of that, but it feels so fake to me sometimes. Like that's my issue with it. That it just feels so like it's. You could say like that. Like I think they say it's like a mini race in a big race. But from Australia, we start a race. The distance is here. We only have cautions if someone screws up and has a crash. But it just for an Aussie point of view, it just feels so bizarre to see this racing that's broken up into segments. Like it's almost like, let's have a race, park the cars for 10 minutes, repair them, and go back out and have the next part of the race. Like, literally break the race into 3 races. In theory, you could do that.
Well, Darky, to be fair, that's what we do in Oz and Z.
Yeah, but that's what we have to do. It's not by choice. If we could run the whole thing, we would run the whole thing like that. But that's unfortunately what we have to do. So
it is a bit unfortunate, and I think also what happens with stage racing is that I think it sort of takes away from the strategy a little bit.
Yeah, I'll say that too, because you're racing to a point. That's the thing. It's sort of like you're not really thinking the long game. You've got to think, all right, I've got to get to this point, then I've got to get to that point. Once you get to that point, then you sort of, I would probably like to see, maybe if they reduce the stage racing to maybe, let's say, 1, what would that do to the series? Like there's a halfway point, that's the thing, and then the end. So I reckon that might really throw a cat amongst the pigeons for people who like strategy to see what would happen then.
Which that's been thought about in the community. One thing that a lot of people have been talking about is, what if we did that one stage like a halfway point and stuff like that? That's been presented before. But the one thing about strategy is I think it makes strategy more complex in that sense, because you'll have some drivers that are like, okay, these stage points are important, let's go for the stage win. And then you have other guys that's like, hey, these guys are going to pit after the end of the stage because they put their cars to where they wanted these stages rather than the race entirely. We're going for the entire race. So it's depending on what drivers want and what their crews want, whether they want to go for the whole win or if they want to stay consistent, go for these stage points and see if they can equal out the amount of points it would take to get a win without necessarily winning the whole race entirely.
That's an interesting point, but I think, okay, take the championship out of it for a bit. What does that actually do to a single race? Does it make it better or does it make it worse? I'm not so sure it makes it better necessarily. I mean, arguably say, okay, here's a caution, it sort of brings everybody back together. But the thing is, cautions get thrown all the time in NASCAR. So if somebody has a half spin or there's a bit of debris on the track, a caution comes out anyway. So I think in a race, you are most likely going to have a caution of some kind anyway. So do we need all these extra cautions as well?
Yeah.
Well, one thing, if you look at before stage racing to now, you're looking at, we actually have less cautions with stage racing than we're averaging less cautions with stage racing than we did ever before without stage racing. And it becomes that during these stages, if there is some form of debris on the track, it allows the NASCAR officials and the NASCAR crew members to go out there and be able to clean up the track during that little bit of a caution. It allows these drivers to calm down, so you wouldn't necessarily get those half spins that you would get probably under what would be a pit cycle at that point or something like that. It allows the drivers to calm down. It allows them to rethink their strategy based on what the other drivers are doing around them and get reset for the next stage or the final stage of the race to where they can go after that win.
Yeah, but you also have to admit that NASCAR has been extremely liberal of throwing a caution when there hasn't really been a need for a caution. And like, oh, there's a piece of debris here, and all the drivers like, where's the debris? NASCAR's just throwing a caution because they want to pack everyone up, so they bring the entertainment to the fans. So yeah.
See, and that's why I believe that stage racing, because you saw that a lot of times before stage racing was introduced. Now you're coming to the end of these races to where most of the times these last chance yellows are only happening at restrictor plates, and you can understand why, because the restrictor plate racing really hasn't changed due to these stage results, except it being more exciting during the race. Instead of seeing a single file line coming to a stage in, these guys, like I mentioned before, are 3-4 wide battling for these stage points. So I believe at certain tracks it helps the product, but I also believe there's several different point of views based on track and what the fans want to see. There's a half the fan base that love these stage racing and that type, and then there's another half that wishes it would go back to the original format. It's just like I said, I feel like it's just the point of view of what type of fan and what type of racing you want to see from NASCAR.
Would it maybe be a good idea to actually, with something like the Daytona 500, it's not a race where you're really generally thinking about the championship as a whole. It's just the race you want to win. Would it maybe be a good idea to remove the stage racing from, when you have the end of a stage, remove sort of the caution? So what I'm thinking you could do is that a race like the Daytona 500, they could have a sort of stage at the halfway mark, like they used to have with the prize money, but once you get to the halfway mark, they don't throw the caution, they just keep on racing and they just award the stage points from there. I think that could be a good idea.
That could possibly, and I don't get you there, that could be a possibility, is take the caution format out of it. The only issue I see with that is that would cause a jumble in strategy, as far as a lot of guys could get trapped a lap down that's going for the win per se rather than the stages. And then also with how these guys race coming to a stage, how aggressive that they get, you see a lot of times coming to the stages that they're 3-4 wide, and sometimes we have the caution is thrown before the stage because guys are wrecking, battling for these stage points. I feel like either way, some sort of caution is going to be beneficial there to be thrown. I do like the idea of having them running it green and just calculating, the segment or whatever, just based on how they cross the start finish line. Yeah. But it's going to throw a wrench into a lot of things, and I feel like that is a good point of view, and I feel like that might be a good idea. It's just something that NASCAR would have to consider moving forward due to all the things that surround that.
What do you reckon would happen if, say, they ran like a virtual safety car? They go, right, instead of like bunching everyone up, they go, all right, we have a virtual safety car. Everyone's to slow down to, say, 100 miles per hour. For 2 laps, everyone can get in their pit stops, get out. Then everyone, the race everyone sort of maintains their position. You get the strategy, and then you go again, like instead of bunching it up. What do you reckon would happen with that? Do you reckon that would work, or it just wouldn't work? Something like that. Say, look, at Daytona.
I think it'd be a little bit pointless, to be honest.
Yeah, but then you get the strategy in, though. Like it might be, it might work, it might work. That's what I'm throwing the question out there. Would something like that actually work as well? So,
see,
the racing still stays, but then you don't get one bunched up. Then the purists have it. Oh, the race is still there. The people like the stage racing, that part is also still there. You sort of compromise both situations.
The issue with that is you really don't see that even with a ton of other oval style racing like IndyCar. You don't see stuff like that as far as them, like with the virtual safety cars and stuff like that. And I feel like with a mainly oval system being ran there whenever you're running on these oval tracks, I feel like it doesn't work with that type of racing. I'd understand if it was a more road course sense to where you could easily make up that time. But in an oval, let's say you try that at Martinsville, there's no way you're going to be able to run that type of virtual safety car there because of how tightly packed that track is. So I feel like the system that they have now as far as the stage racing. There's a lot of problems I still feel like with the rules package and playoff system, which I'm assuming we'll get to later. But I feel like the stage racing has brought a lot more to the sport than it's taken away.
That's fair enough. Darky, do you think it has added to the sport or not?
It depends on what camp you're in. If you're a purist who just wants to see racing, I reckon it's taken away. But if you're a person who likes it, like give it NASCAR. It's entertainment. That's what the sport's become more now. But if you like where, as you said, everyone's battling to get those things, that gives you a thing. It depends on what camp you're in. If you're a purist who wants to see racing, you hate it. If you like the entertainment because you see these packs coming to get this line, to get these points, you're loving it. So it's kind of where you sort of sit in it. So I like to see the racing aspect. I like to see the pure racing, but that could be a point of maybe the races are too long. So maybe you shorten the races down. You end up with the same racing format with instead of having the 3 stages technically, have the 1 stage with a shorter race. So then you make everyone more aggressive. So
we will get to the issue of race length, but I think whilst we're on the subject of format, I think we should move on to the playoffs. Are the playoffs a bit stupid?
I feel like this version of the playoffs is stupid. Looking overall, like I mentioned before about the Kevin Harvick incident, even though the stage points saved him, he came in as overall the championship favorite. The amount of races he's won. Same thing with Denny Hamlin. Both of them had incidents at Texas before the rain delay in which they were below the cutoff line. It was threatening that they wouldn't make it into the Final Four, even though they were obviously the top 2 drivers this season. And I think we've seen in the championship for the past few years that guys that weren't necessarily looked at, they were probably the 3rd or 4th best driver. They didn't even deserve to be in the Final Four because they got locked in on a win. I feel like that's something that NASCAR has had an issue with, to where you have these guys that not necessarily have deserved the championship, have gone up and snuck their way into the Final Four by locking themselves in with a win. And I find that hard to look at because let's look at Joey Logano at Michigan. That's a issue that we've looked at for these guys that a lot of fans saw backlash as a failure of the package, because Joey Logano was below the cut line at this point heading into the championship 4 round. He goes in, wins the first race of the round of 8, and he's into the championship 4. And then you have guys like Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, Alex Bowman, who you could say, hey, they are Final Four drivers. They may not be championship running drivers, but they are Final Four drivers. And now they're battling out, and only one of them is going to be able to get in.
yeah.
Yeah, but it does have its benefits, I will admit. It does keep the championship alive until the final race. But I feel like it sort of invalidates, like, there's no real reward of the regular season. It doesn't reward consistency. It's just, you could finish consistently all throughout the year. You can win as many races as you can want. You can finish strong at every single race, but then, something like that might happen. Or, you could just finish consistently generally, maybe not win as many races, but then or any races at all, but then you just get beaten to the championship by some guy who's won 1 race. And I don't think that's, I feel like it sort of takes it's not a championship. Well, it's not a championship in the traditional sense, but I'm not sure it's the greatest idea. It might be good from an entertainment standpoint, but I just don't think it's, I think it's a bit silly, to be honest.
And a lot of fans have shown their disgust with the playoffs as far as that sense, because you look at, just to give you an example, to show what the failure that the playoff system was and has become. Not to talk down this driver, but Kyle Busch, the year he broke both of his legs at the inaugural race that year in the Xfinity Daytona race, he was out for nearly half the season. He returned at Sonoma and won the race and locked himself into the playoff and ended up winning the championship that year after winning Sonoma, getting locked in and heading on to win the title, even though he missed half the season.
Yeah,
so I feel...
Yeah. That's not fair at all. That's not racing. That's just pure luck, then.
I feel like at that point, it takes away a lot of the prestige and the actual, like Jack mentioned, the reward and the value of the actual NASCAR Cup Series title. And it extends all the way down into the Xfinity and Truck Series, to where how can you actually crown a real champion when it just depends on if you're good on one night at one place and at the right time. So, I mean, it's really just a toss-up on how this championship is won. You could look at any car in the field at day one and be like, they could win the title, and you'd actually have a sensible argument there. I feel like the original chase style for the Cup, to where it was the Winston point system, except they reset at the start of the playoffs. I feel like that was the best playoff system, and I feel like that's what we should return to, is having the one reset and then no wins lock you in and just battle it all the way out to the championship race. I feel like that.
So, quick question. So, do you reckon, so say you return to that system, so, but then would you have the final, 10, 12? What do you reckon would be the best format? Do you reckon the final 10 battle for the championship at the end? Or, so like the final 10 races, you lock in, right, these are the people battle for the championship, reset, all their points go back to zero. Whoever wins at the end, has the most points at the end, is the champion. Do you reckon it will be 10 or 12 or 15? What do you reckon would be the right number for that?
I feel like they'd keep it at the 16. I know that as the playoffs has evolved into this, I feel like that they have grown and it has, how should I say, they have evolved and allowed more drivers to enter to keep it more exciting. I feel like they'd keep it the number that it's at right now. I feel like that makes the most sense, to be able to keep that many drivers in contention, because people are talking about, they keep eliminating drivers and stuff like that. The eliminations will happen themselves as long as they stay with this consistency range. The eliminations will happen themselves. You'll still have the regular seasons. You can win your way into the playoffs. But once you get to the playoffs, it'll really cycle out who are the best drivers and who are not, to go after that championship.
Yeah, that would make the best system, I reckon, because then you get the people who want the entertainment side, and then you got the people who want the purest racing, want to see the best driver out of the day win the championship. I reckon that would actually be the best scenario for both that, because as you said, you don't want someone to win one race, win the last race, and they're the championship. They're sort of devaluing the championship if the guy who wins two races is the championship and misses half a year. Like, and no offense, but you got to stop making this manufactured drama race, the last race. Which of these two drivers can go for the championship? Sometimes that happens naturally, sometimes it doesn't, but you just got to let it roll. Like, get rid of the manufacturing of this excitement and all this hype. And if you just let people, like the system you just proposed, if you did that, the excitement will come naturally. And I reckon you might get actually, because as you can see, NASCAR's fans is in a bit of decline. That actually will probably start bringing them back as well. So,
well, hold on. When you say a bit of decline, I think you mean a massive decline.
Yeah, it's Armageddon on the fans scale. Like, I've seen videos of, like, at Bristol and it's packed, and then you see a new one. It's like, where's the fans? Why have they all just got, nah, screw this, I'm out?
I think the stat was it went from being the second. I think it was the second biggest sport in the US around the early 2000s, and then after that it's dropped. I think it's even dropped almost below IMSA now. Which, I mean, fair, like, no disrespect to IMSA, but if your series is dropping behind in popularity to a sports car endurance racing series, then you've certainly got a problem.
Do you reckon stuffing with the rules too much as cause is Armageddon of fans?
To be fair, I don't feel like it's either of those. To be honest, I feel like it sways more to outside than NASCAR. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened within NASCAR that I feel like adds to the separation. But I feel like it's also a change in the times, and a lot of political stuff has happened that NASCAR has stayed out of, and recently they've gone back into it to try to gain relevance again. I feel like that's what it mainly surrounds. You see the NFL that NASCAR was rivaling at the time. You see in the early 2000s, they were talking about how much they rivaled the Super Bowl versus the Daytona 500. And then you look at it now, and it's just a massive difference. Like Jack said, I feel like the NFL, the NBA, these sports that have surpassed NASCAR, they've been so much in pop culture when NASCAR really hasn't, tried to expand itself. It's literally stayed with the old fan base, and I feel like it stayed with it for too long, and now it's literally cringy now how desperate it is to try to reach out to the younger fans, and you can see you can see how bad it is with all this stuff. They're really trying to reach out to the younger generation, and you can see it being a desperate attempt, and I think it turns more fans away than it brings in.
Well, okay. Well, then the question is, how do you get fans to the tracks to watch the series? Like we might bring this up a bit later on with that, but like as I said, maybe there's too much racing. Maybe if you spread it out, maybe give people, if it's not, it's one of those things. The less there is, the more you want it, sort of deal. So it's a weird one. So.
And that is one of our dot points for later. We have two more things to cover in this first little section. I think we should move on. This was the dot point. We have 2 rules.
That was a big discussion coming out of Talladega this year. There's a big rule discussion with that. And I think Dale Jr., if you watch the end of the NBC broadcast, if you were able to get that, he talked about it as far as the yellow line rule was really a issue for them as far as looking over what to change. And they discussed the yellow line rule as something that has to go. You got to look at these style of cars, how they have been putting through so many rules and stuff like that. And like I said, the yellow line rule is the big one. The rules package, I think, needs an overhaul completely there. It's really taken out how drivers, as far as behavioral wise, you really don't have the outlaws that you did back in the 1990s and the early 2000s that really attracted fans to the sport. You don't really have the good guy, bad guy scenario a lot anymore. It's literally just drivers are getting in their cars and driving, and it takes out a lot of, the extra curricular activities outside of the racing that really made it exciting in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, I reckon a lot of that is also it's a bit of the nature of the beast, is the fact that these sponsors want clean cut drivers. They don't want people yelling, swearing, drinking beer, catering to fights. Like the sponsors sort of dictating the types of drivers they want, and that's NASCAR's sort of built up. You have an argument, you take someone out, or you get in the garage and have a biffer. Like we've seen arguments, but
and then you end up getting fined from that too,
yeah,
because
exactly.
Massive fines and points penalties because of actions like that.
Yeah, because the integrity of NASCAR doesn't look good. Screw that. Let them have it. What do you think happens? Like, was it one of the a video I keep seeing is not Kevin Harvick, Matt
Kyle
Kenseth.
Larson. Oh well.
No. This is an older one. Matt Kenseth takes out Joey Logano, and the crowd goes nuts because you can tell they've had beef, and he's just like, "Screw you, you're out of the race." And you just listen to the fans, and they're just going nuts. Like they need to sort of allow the drives to be more free. Just as long as they're not swearing on TV and say anything goes, but keep it within these sort of ranges, and then let the drivers be drivers, not the coppers. Yes, I like to thank my sponsor. My race was really good. My manager, blah 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 blah. Sort of let them actually be drivers. Let them have a personality. And I reckon if you did that, the fans would come. So.
And that was the same thing with like the Jeff Gordon, Clint Boyer incident like before. But like I said, like there's some cases, like I was just mentioning, the Kyle Larson situation that just got resolved. That's one of the things that I can understand why they're so strict. But when it comes to like stuff like the Jeff Gordon, Clint Boyer incident at Phoenix, I think it was in 2012, or the Matt Kenseth, Joe Logano incident, that's where you just got to say, boys, have at it, and let problems be decided on the track or in the hauler between them, instead of just hashing it out over checks and points penalties.
Do you reckon at the end of the race they should put him in a room, go, here's a bat, go nuts, all right, walk out. Well, I reckon the biggest problem is they see this stuff on TV and the sponsors go, oh, I don't like that, it's making our brand look bad. Just go, you got a problem, say like, room now, boys, go. And whoever walks out with a black eye, done. That's it. Don't care.
They do have that. It's called the UFC. I think that's a merger between NASCAR and UFC. That would be pretty nice.
See, okay, can we talk about the Talladega thing for a bit? Because I feel like, they said you can't go below the yellow line, and then Denny Hamlin, he went below the yellow line when he could have slowed up, and then he just won. It's just, well, hold on. That he's just blatantly cheated, and he's gone and won it. So he shouldn't have won that race. You've got to be consistent here.
And that's a
Yeah.
big problem. If you look over the yellow line decisions over the past few years, the same thing happened with Regan Smith a few years ago with the battle with Tony Stewart coming to the line, and they decided to give it to Stewart because Smith went below the WL line trying to dodge an incident. Actually, Smith got forced, but they said Hamlin was trying to dodge an incident. I feel as if that they have to be consistent. Whether you're dodging an incident or not, they can't have the extra stuff down there as far as I understand if somebody forces you down there, they got a right call with Joey Logano and Matt DiBenedetto earlier in that race. But if you're looking at there has to be that rule that's like you can't go down there. You can't. I don't care if you're avoiding an incident or not. You have 3 other lanes above you to try to avoid it or you're colliding into it, but you can't go down there to advance position.
Well,
That
Talladega's super wide, so there's not like there's plenty of room to do stuff like that. But my question is with Talladega, the yellow line, when it's like, is it actually at the between the where the banking starts and the apron, or is it sort of the whole thing is sort of banked at Talladega?
in the middle of the corners, it is. On the exit, it's kind of it flattens out with the rest of the lanes too, to where you can get down there on the exit of the corner and still be okay. But on the entry and middle of it is when you can cause accidents by going up. Let's say if you enter on the apron going into the 3, and then you're trying to move up and cut up onto the banking, that's when problems arise. We saw
Okay, so there is an angle to it, so that will affect the cars.
On the entry and middle of the corner there is. On the exit, not so much.
Yeah.
So do you reckon if they move the line closer to like the grass, do you reckon that would make it a bit more interesting?
No, because if they moved it closer to the grass, I feel like drivers would try to that's kind of like the out of bounds lines. Drivers use that a lot as a marker to be like in the middle of the corner, hey, this is as far as I can go, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to tell that kind of like seam difference there because the track looked so similar on both sides. But that leaving that marker there, I feel like it's one of those things that you can't. You either have to enforce it completely and not leave anything to chance there, being like, well, if there's a wreck, you can go down there to dodge it. No, you can't go down there. That it has to be that type of rule and no rule at all.
Right, so I think we should move on to the aero package, and this has been something that a lot of people have attributed the downfall of NASCAR to. So Josh, you've seen a lot of NASCAR racing, you've seen a lot of different aero packages. What went wrong and what needs to change? And also, how are the new regulations coming in going to maybe or maybe not fix the problems that they've been having?
See, I think the problem comes to they've changed the cars so much and just the generation of cars that they've had now that fans have kind of lost distrust on the type of racing that we're seeing. They've corrected a few things. They've also gotten a few things a little bit worse. I think Michigan showed that with that type of package. At these high draft tracks that aren't plate tracks, you see these guys that sorry, my throat. You see these guys that you can't really pass at these high draft tracks that aren't plate tracks. So it's kind of made the racing a little bit less interesting, and that's where I feel like stage racing has added so much to it, is it allows more passing to happen. But it's so hard to pass once these cars get single file with that type of package. Now at the restrictor plates and short tracks, the racing has been immaculate with this package. So I feel like there's that one little area that they're going to have to fix. But I remember a few years ago when the racing was so bad at every track that the fans just started leaving because of how bad the racing was. So I think with the new generation of cars coming in, NASCAR, if they really want to rebuild their fan base, they really have to put what the fans want behind those cars, the type of racing we want to see. A lot of drivers have said that it's tougher and really it's going to depend on driver skill with these cars with the regulation change and stuff and it being such low downforce. So it's going to be interesting to see how these drivers handle the next generation of cars and see how the fans respond.
Darky, do you have anything to say on that in that regard?
It's kind of, you look, okay, it is weird when you watch the racing and then you look at the onboard camera and you see the rear wing, and it's like, here's the rear wing, but you actually look above it, it's a clear perspex, and the wing goes up so much higher, so that one looks weird to me. this rear wing that's that big, they've had to make it clear so the drivers can actually see through it. So yeah, I think like if the aero package right now at the short tracks and the super speedways is pretty decent, like the racing seems to be pretty good there. Like you said in Michigan, like do you just whip it all off completely? But then the cars are too fast. You got to find the right balance for the aero for NASCAR because the car's going so fast, but you can't make them stupidly out of control. But you got to slow them down. And like it's a weird mixture of what they need to do because you can't have them stupidly fast because then passing isn't going to happen. But then when they have a crash, it's going to be too big. But you can't have them too much aero, then passing is not going to happen. I think it's a hard one for NASCAR to do. So.
See, and the one way I feel like they've discussed this with a new car on how they're going to fix that type of situation is that they focused on this new car a lot about driver safety. So I think they're focusing on how fast can these cars go and how fast can they allow that package to be and how tough it is to drive within that package. How can they do that while also maintaining driver safety just in case of accidents?
But I think this was maybe a problem a couple of years ago. I mean, this may just be down to the nature of super speedway racing. I mean, I'll be honest. I only started watching some NASCAR stuff a couple of years ago, but I think it was the 2018 Daytona 500 when Eric Almirola was a shoe-in to win. And then Dylan wrecked him because there was no way he would have been able to get past on merit. So he just wrecked him. I'm like, well, hold on. I think there's a problem there if it's actually at the point where you couldn't overtake on an oval or pass for the win without just wrecking somebody. I think that was something that definitely needed to change. I mean, I think they may have done a few things to fix this, but I think there may be some issues there.
I think if you watched Dega, their restrictor plate style of racing has definitely worked. There was so many lead changes at the end of those races and at the end of those stages and how close the finishes actually are at the restrictor plate tracks now. I feel like the main concern, and we saw that in the Daytona 500 with Ryan Newman's wreck, is going to come down to driver safety and how much they can do with these cars while maintaining that safety. I think that's what NASCAR is trying to balance out. The big thing I'd say is that, you have to, of course, in every instance, like a course in the NFL to provide their product, even though they enforce player safety, injuries are still going to occur there. And I'm not saying expect injuries in NASCAR, but you have to expect wrecks and you have to expect bad ones. But, you can't have one or the other. You can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, it's one of the things that they have to prioritize something more than the other, or at least back something more than the other, and that's something that NASCAR has to choose. And it's a very hard decision whether to decide, do you want to protect your product or do you want to protect your drivers?
Well, that would legally have to protect the drivers because if one of them gets killed on track, the lawsuit because of negligence would be massive and it would just wipe out NASCAR completely. So they have to protect the drivers. That's fundamental. They have to do that no matter what. So
yeah, and nobody wants to see drivers getting killed. That's everybody likes to see a bit of a crash, but nobody wants to see drivers getting killed or really hurt.
Or seriously,
of course. And a part of NASCAR with their contracts, it's been stated that these teams, whenever they do that, they have stated that they can't hold NASCAR liable. So NASCAR, this is a moral decision that they're having to make. And a big thing that has been noted is after Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death, a lot of people credited that to the sport's decline is because he was such a big star, like we were talking before about the rules package, is that these guys, whenever you're looking at the bad guy and good guy, he was such a big star in the sport and was pretty much the face of the sport. And when he passed away, you could see how much NASCAR rushed into producing safer racing for the drivers rather than, making the product better. So I think that's where NASCAR is going to have to look over, what they did right and what they did wrong and try to make a decision based on that.
Yeah,
they also don't want to be known as a series when, come to watch the race, someone's going to die. They don't want to be known for that stuff. So
yeah, no, and nobody wants to see that. I mean, as I said before, everybody likes a good crash compilation, and everybody kind of likes the wrecks in NASCAR because it makes it exciting. But you don't want to see people getting hurt. You don't want to see people getting killed. That's just not fun for anybody, and it's horrible to see. And as you said, it was especially horrible with what happened to Dale Earnhardt. So,
and you've seen the strides that IndyCar, the FIA, places like that have made, and to keep driver safety while putting at risk the product. And even though of course it's different styles of racing, they've been able to maintain that product. I think that's what NASCAR is trying to do, is trying to be inclusive of that style of racing. Like the amount of low danger tracks that they've added, the amount of road courses that are now on the schedule that people joke about, ha ha ha, that's so inclusive and they're just going to hand wins to Truex and Chase Elliott. No, it's looking at how can we keep the product, exciting while maintaining driver safety. You notice they pulled back a lot of these tracks to where it's been shown to hand out injuries. As a guy that was a fan of Auto Club, them changing it to a short track, I'm not necessarily happy about it, but I can see why, because you look at injuries like Dale Jr.'s crash that led to his retirement because of the multiple concussions that he received and how bad that wreck affected him at Auto Club. You can see that they're trying to tone down all these really bad tracks while also maintaining the racing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All very interesting points. I think we should move on to our next stop point, which we've actually brought up a few times throughout the episode, but we'll talk about it in depth now. Are there too many races, and are the races too long? Now, I think I'll just lay down my point first, and I'll let you guys talk about this as well. I think there are too many races. I mean, it was fine when NASCAR was one of the biggest sports in the US. Everybody wanted more and more and more of it, but now it's sort of different. And also, I think, you have races like the Daytona 500. That's fine. You can have a long race. It's a special event. Go for your life. But I think when you're having, on a weekly basis, races that are 400 miles long, that's an endurance race at that point, and that's too long. So do we need... Maybe, you have your big long races, Daytona or Indy or Talladega or whatever it might be. But should you also have maybe, and this might sound ridiculous, but maybe even something like 40-minute sprint races at most, and just keep the races short. And if it's boring, it's fine because it's short. But then because it's also short, there's less time to take the lead, so more drivers are taking risks, and it's more interesting. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I looked up the average of what a NASCAR race. I think it said about 3.5 hours is the average for a NASCAR race. 3.5 hours. That's a long time to watch a car race, week in, week out. So, my theory is less is more. Like, was it 33, 34 races with the All-Stars race? Like, you've got to have some of the big ones. But look, if you're watching a race every weekend, it kind of gets to a point going, it's a NASCAR race, I'm going to miss it. If there's less racing, like, I can see the purists going, we've had always these many races. But how long is a year, too? These guys, they start in February, I think, was it February for Daytona, and when they're going to finish, they're going to have, 1 month off? Like, the reason why I think Marcus Ambrose pulled out of the pin was burnout, too many races. I think, someone else, that happened to someone else, I can't remember his name. Someone else, I think, pulled out because he was just getting burnt out now. I think if there's, I hate to say it, but if you cut the event down to, say, 20 races, and maybe have one every second weekend, then the fans have a chance to miss the racing. Then they'll go, NASCAR racing, sweet. If not, if I miss this one, I'm going to have to wait a month for the next one. And then I reckon the races need to be, I think the perfect number for car racing for races is 2 hours. You've got to have the race within a 2-hour window. From the time the green starts and the checkers finishes, that's racing 2 hours. In between, the fluff between front and end, that can be half an hour. But I think 2 hours is probably the right limit. I know the races will be, say it's not going to be like the Martinsville 500. It'll be like the Martinsville 250 or something like that. The races will become these weird odd numbers because that's what NASCAR likes to do. It's like Chicago, Atlanta, 500, 400. They're not going to go, it's a 200. People are going, 200? What the hell's a 200? It's going to seem weird to Americans if you say, we're going to have like a 100-mile race here.
And to go over that, what I feel like, and I feel like NASCAR experimented with it this year, I don't feel like you lessen the amount of races. I do agree with the distance, though. We looked at this with the double headers at like Charlotte and stuff like that, to where you had, a race at Charlotte, and then 4 days later had another race at Charlotte, had a race at Darlington, like all due to the COVID procedures to try to make up that schedule. I feel like that could be something NASCAR tries to implement in its regular season as far as like trying to get everything and making it natural instead of just doing it as a COVID procedure, we saw a lot more exciting racing, a lot more guys that even though you didn't have that practice in qualifying, I felt like it was a lot more exciting racing as far as that goes, and I feel like you could carry that over into this upcoming season to where you wouldn't have as long of a schedule, but you know it wouldn't be as long of a schedule as far as in length of the calendar year, but you'd still maintain the same amount of races and be able to have those events that you want to as far as the big events, but also be able to compact a lot of these smaller events together.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. And, as you said, Darky, 3.5 hours. If you think about it, a European Le Mans Series race is 4 hours.
Is 3 to 4.5 hours. That's an endurance race.
Like, so there's all us motorsport fans. I mean, we're all, we like watching endurance racing from time to time. And, I know, like, we just had the Bathurst 1000 go by. On certain days, we're happy to sit down and watch 6 hours of racing. But I think for the casual fan, other than Daytona, that can obviously be long because it's a special event. But for the casual fan, it's too much racing to come every week and watch a 3-hour race. No, just you don't have the sort of time for that. I mean, I think, we definitely need to cut down the number of races per year, or maybe the amount of time per race is whatever you want to do, and also cut down on some of the distances as well, because it's just too much racing and it's too long.
And one thing I want to mention, I know we're going to carry it over, but we talked about all these special events and stuff like that they need to keep. One thing I feel like NASCAR failed at for the fans looking over as far as distance and just races in general, I feel like turning the Brickyard 400 into a road course race rather than the traditional Brickyard, I feel like that was kind of an injustice to fans. You could add the Indy road course as a extra race in there, but I feel like changing the traditional Brickyard race to a road course is kind of a poor decision on NASCAR's part as far as scheduling.
Yeah, but you could go 1 year. All right, we're going to do the oval 1 year road course next year to give a bit of spice. You can do that with Indy. That's the benefit of the track, that you can switch it up year to year. So you go, we're going to see the oval race 1 year. Next year we're going to see the road course. That might be a way to go instead of just going all road course now.
But I think they should be considered two different events. I don't think it should be the Brickyard 400 on the road course or the Brickyard 400 on the oval. I think the Brickyard 400 needs to be on the oval, and then you have a separate race on the road course. I don't think they should be classified as the same event.
I agree with that as well, because we've seen a lot of, even though this year's race wasn't that well received because of the package, I feel like once they turn over the new leaf with the new cars, it'd be valuable, and I'd say even smart by NASCAR to at least try to go back to the oval style of racing and see how that is and actually separate the events instead of keeping them together. Because I know a bunch of fans that even though a lot of people spoke out against the oval racing there at Indy, I feel like the casual NASCAR fan loves to see the Brickyard 400 on the oval rather than the road course.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Can we? I think we should move on to our final dot point, because I feel like everything that we needed to have said has been said there. And our third dot point, the third umbrella dot point of the day, is give the fans what they want. Now, I know what people have been asking for years is more road courses, and they're giving us more road courses. That's a great thing. Can I just establish oval racing isn't bad? I know there'll be maybe some European viewers watching this saying, NASCAR, it's oval racing, it's boring. Oval racing isn't boring. It's just sometimes in NASCAR, oval racing can be a bit boring. But I think if you can get a mixture of road courses and an ovals, that's great, like they do in IndyCar. So I think, definitely more road courses. They should maybe consider going to Road Atlanta, maybe go to Road America with the Cup Series. What do you guys think about that? And is there anything else that you guys really think the fans want and should be implemented?
One thing that I feel like, and I understand, I mentioned it before, Michigan should have got the rebrand over Auto Club. I feel like a lot of fans feel that way as far as why they wanted to rebrand Auto Club. I feel like Michigan should have got that. I love the idea of more road courses. I feel like that would give drivers who have that road course background, such as talking about drivers from before, Juan Pablo Montoya, Marcus Ambrose, and now you have guys like Chase Elliott, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, a lot of Brad Keselowski I even throw in there. A lot of these guys that have experienced shifter carts on road courses and asphalt through there that have these type of experiences to be able to drive these courses well. I feel like it adds more exciting racing for that. They finally added a dirt race to the Cup Series, which I feel like is
They
a long time
really?
coming. They
Yeah,
added
Bristol.
the
Oh
Spring Bristol
my
race will be
god.
on dirt next year. The Spring
So
Bristol race will be on dirt next year.
that will be something interesting because I've seen a bit of racing from the trucks on the dirt, and that is some wild, mad racing. So the Cup cars on dirt is going to be insane. I reckon.
And I
I
feel
reckon
like
a lot of people are going to tune in for that one to see how mad it is.
if that race goes well, I guarantee you fans will claw for more of those races. As a guy that grew up around dirt racing, I feel like as long as NASCAR does it right, it'll be a great race. So, like I said, like these guys, they're really pushing for these type of tracks. I'm looking at also we're seeing these restrictor plate races. I feel like the night Daytona race, the day Daytona race, of course, mentioning the Daytona 500, both Talladega races. I feel like there's a lot more tracks that they could try to go to achieve what they have at those tracks, especially with the change in the package. Michigan is obviously a track that they can change the package and it end up turning into one of those restrictor plate style push me tracks. So I mean, it's one of those things that what NASCAR decides to do with this upcoming car, they can really give these fans a lot that these fans won't. It's just all up to what NASCAR does with the next generation of vehicles.
And a little bit more on the road courses. The road course racing has been brilliant, but I think if you're going to optimize the road courses in the Cup Series, I think you need to make the cars a little bit lighter because the Cup Series cars, they're light for a house, but
For a barge.
for a barge. But I think you know, if you look at the Xfinity races on a road course, those cars are a little bit lighter. I reckon, but judge, I don't know the exact weights. I reckon those Xfinity cars they probably weigh about the same as maybe a GT3 car. So
The
um,
Cup cars, I do know the Cup cars weigh about 2,786 pounds, somewhere in there.
what's that in kilos? I have no idea.
I have no idea.
So that's completely meaningless to me. But
Someone in the comments tell us what it is, okay?
yeah, tell us what it is. This will be premiering, so one of you guys can go work it out. But you know, I reckon if you took some weight off the Cup cars for the road courses, I reckon the road course racing would be even better because the road course racing in Cup cars is brilliant. And actually, that's an interesting thing. If you look at the last episode of this we talked about supercars, and supercars, they don't look it, but they've got quite a lot of downforce. And I remember Darky said some of the best racing of the day you'll see at a racetrack is the low downforce, low speed cars. That's exactly what a Cup car is. It's not a lot of downforce and it's quite low speeds. And so the road course racing is brilliant.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of clips. If you go on YouTube, you find plenty of clips of mad road course racing, like people bumping and grinding, driving off the track. Like one of Marcus Ambrose's win with I think it was Brad Keselowski. They're literally off the track at Watkins Glen at the chicane. Like it's insane to watch stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like there was, I think the Roval had the Infinity Series in the wet. Like
that was mental. That was awesome.
And they even had the Cup Series, just to give a little factoid, that was the first time the Cup Series ran on a wet track was at the Roval this year. And you saw benefits like that of Ty Dillon, winning a stage. Guys like underdogs that had experiences on road courses and knew how to handle those situations were in poor performing cars that were on dry tracks, not doing well in oval racing. They didn't do well. Come there and under their weight conditions were able to, put together spectacular performances. I feel like adding in the rain racing too with the road courses is something that the fans are going to want to see more of as well.
And I think
like if you set up a road course in a part of America where, look, NASCAR, they pretty much set up all the races to be where it's going to be dry so we can run the race. But you can set up, we're going to set up a road course in this part of America, and we're going to set up in winter, like not snow season, but rain season. You go, all right, it's for chance it's going to be wet or dry. That will actually add to the excitement by doing stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think if they can get, in terms of giving the fans what they want, I think if they can have great oval races, great road course races, and great dirt races, great short track races, if you get the whole mix of different tracks and the racing is good in all of them, and they can sort of optimize the cars to do well on all those, or to race well on all these different tracks, then the racing's going to be fantastic.
It certainly will be, and it's just fans have picked out what they want, and you could look all over social media. They've let NASCAR know what they want. It's all up to NASCAR now to decide what it's going to be. Now, one thing that fans clamored for, but I disagree with, is they're returning to the Nashville Fairgrounds this upcoming year, and I feel like we haven't really seen that track be active much, and now that it's returning straight up to the Cup Series without, seeing time at the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series, I feel kind of concerned about that. They've gotten rid of Iowa, Chicagoland, and places like that a lot of fans love the racing at. So to really get the fans on their side, they're really going to have to do something with this upcoming package and the tracks that they've chosen to stay at.
Yeah, it's fair enough. And I think one more thing, you guys mentioned personality before. If you let some of the drivers sort of be themselves, I mean, they've got to sort of keep the sponsors happy, but if you let some of the drivers, be themselves a little bit more, it will draw more fans to sport, because the racing will be good and the personalities will be larger than life. And I think that will really, really benefit the series if they can sort of find that balance.
Yeah, if NASCAR said to the sponsors, look, we know you're spending a bucket, and the sponsors are spending a bucket load of money in these cars. Like, the cost of these cars to run is so high that I've heard it's ridiculous. It says, look, you want to get your name out there, but look, we're going to allow the drivers to swear, potentially not really curse, but we're going to let them loose a bit more. If you don't like it, sorry, NASCAR isn't for you. We want, how do you get your name out there? Oh, did you hear about such and such at the Biffa or such? What car was your? Oh, the 24, Visor, this car, and the other, people remember these cars because of stuff like that happens. So.
Oh yeah, everybody remembers the good wrench cars. Everybody remembers, all these different cars with personalities larger than life. So yeah.
To add to that, like, one thing that NASCAR is trying to compare itself to, its other racing counterparts in IMSA and IndyCar and stuff like that, trying to, appeal to more the corporate side than its own fan base. And I feel like there was one thing that NASCAR needs to be true to itself. And one thing that people in the outside that was mainly around corporate sponsors, they looked down on NASCAR and was just like, that's the nitty gritty place where all the hard racing and, the not so proper people are and stuff like that as far as the racing world. And NASCAR at that time, when it was around its fan base, was like, yeah, that's us. And now that they're trying to appeal to more corporate sponsors, they kind of shut the door on that. And I feel like that's what they need to return to, especially if they want to get that fan base back. Like, I know the FIA has been cracking down on the similar sort of things in F1, and you see guys like Lewis Hamilton that are fighting back against it. I mean, it may not be up to the NASCAR at this point. It may be up to the drivers to be able to let their attitudes known. You've seen that with guys like Kyle Busch, who has stood against the system. There's infamous clips of him out there flipping off, race officials while in the car, and
What was it? He had an interview. He goes, he just gave the one response no matter what they asked. I can't remember what it was, but he just said, "I'm here for such and such and such." The next question, "I'm here for such and such," and that's all he did. I think I'm only here because NASCAR told me to say something.
Proud of the crew. Had a great car today. Just moving on to Phoenix next week.
Yeah, and he said that over and over and over again, and gave the reporters nothing because he knew if he said anything out of line, he was going to get in trouble. Like stuff like that, you've got to allow them. Like that's NASCAR cracking the whip on him. But at the same time, that's the other side. Like that's produced like a great clip of of a NASCAR driver basically giving the finger to him, so screw you.
Anyway, I think we've all presented some very interesting points today. Does anyone have any general problems they have with the series that they'd like to get fixed before we maybe sort of summarize everything we've gone over today and maybe wrap it up?
I mean, I think we pretty much discussed and put everything out there. I mean, I couldn't detail anything much about it as far as they've done well on trying to even out the competition. With that, you see that with how well John Hunter Nemechek as a rookie performed this year, and the porous equipment that he had compared to other teams and such. So I feel like outside of what we discussed, they're doing pretty well as far as giving the fans what they want and doing what they need to do. just moving forward, I feel like it'd be something that we could discuss possibly if we did this again in the later video. If any other fans of the series also, if you want to drop that down in the comment section, I'm going to go ahead and give Jack the plug. Go ahead and give topics that you'd want to see us discuss if we were to do this again, because, I mean, I feel like that overall we discussed a lot of the big issues that's been going on with NASCAR as well already.
I'd certainly be open to doing a part 2, problem with NASCAR part 2 if everybody's interested in it, and we have enough compelling reasons to do so. And I'd certainly be happy to discuss those reasons as well. I'll also respond to any comments about that, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. So one thing I like to bring up. So I think the main thing, like you said there, Josh, was the championship points. If they redid the championship points where bar set to 0, go from there. Maybe reduce the length of the race, shorten the races a bit, give the different variants of tracks. You know, if the car package is going to be good, look, I don't know a lot about it. I've seen a bit of it, but not a lot about it. If they get it right, but I think they need to stop listening to corporate people and go, what is our roots? Go, all right, we need to go back 20 years. What were we then? We were a bit rough, a bit bogan. You know, we were seen as, you know, this is what the peasant people were. Give the fans what they want. No offense to corporate. I know you need the money, but say to them, look, without the fans, we are nothing. Your sponsorship isn't getting seen by people. Go back to the roots. You have to take it. Sometimes you got to go 10 steps back to go. Oh, look at yourself. They need to have a good look at themselves. Look at what they've done wrong. Look what they've done right, and go. All right, cool. This works, and just tweak it. They're not massive change like they tend to do sometimes, but just go. All right, that didn't work. Pull it back. That didn't work, but that did work. Maybe push it a little bit more. Just slow it down sometimes, and then I reckon if they do the main things, the series will become good.
Well, I think that's a perfect summary, and if nobody's got anything more to say, I think we could look at ending this.
I mean, I'd be fine. I got a pulled pork sandwich waiting on me.
And on that note, I think it's time to end. Thank you very much to Darky for joining us once again, and thank you very much to Josh for joining us as well. All the socials will be in the description below, so Josh's show will be in the description below. Darky's Facebook page will be in the description below as well, along with all the TCR stuff as well, including the Discord server. So please go check those guys. Go check all those links out. Thank you very much for tuning in to the second episode of The Problem with X. I can assure you, if this episode does well, we will be back with more series in the future. And also, thank you all so much for 500 subscribers on Triple Crown Racing. As Darky said, without the fans, we're nothing. And you guys are certainly great fans. So on that note, I think it's time to end. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.